Secretary, the floor is yours.
Her audience may have been American, but her words were aimed squarely homewards.
Multiculturalism makes no demands of the incomer to integrate. It has failed because it allowed people to come to our society and live parallel lives in it. We are living with the consequence of that failure today. You can see it play out in the streets all over Europe, from Malmo to Paris, Brussels to Leicester.
At a right-wing think tank in Washington, D.C. today, the Home Secretary announced her next adversary.
In the 1951 UN Refugee Convention.
It's a treaty born out of the horrors of World War II, signed by post-war governments, including Winston Churchill's, and designed to stop refugees being returned to countries where their lives or freedoms would be under threat. It defines a refugee as anyone with a well-founded fear of being persecuted for reasons of race, religion, nationality, membership of a particular social group or political opinion. But Suella Braverman said this was a world bound by outdated legal models, that the treaty was in need of reform.
As case law has developed, what we have seen in practice is an interpretive shift away from persecution in favour of something more akin to a definition of discrimination. But we will not be able to sustain an asylum system if, in effect, simply being gay or a woman or fearful of discrimination in your country of origin is sufficient to qualify for protection.
Words matter to Zach, not his real name, and the wording of the convention was one of the things that helped him claim asylum here a few months ago. In his home country, being gay is a criminal offence.
It's only 2% of the asylum claim comes from LGBT people, and you have to remember that 2% is not a success rate, and the success rate is very, very low. This is the most vulnerable people who need protection.
And while small boat crossings have been rising, with more than 45,000 people arriving in 2022, Labour said the government was to blame for what it called asylum chaos.
So she's ramping up the rhetoric and looking around for someone else to blame. The failure to go after the criminal gangs, the failure to stop dangerous boat crossings increasing, the failure to end the hotel use or clear the backlog in the asylum system all lie with the Conservative government, not with international arrangements.
Stopping small boats has become one of the so-called 5 pledges of a Prime Minister with an election on the horizon.
Small boats, that really annoys our readers, members here, I'm sure.
Some have suggested today's announcement may have more to do with the Home Secretary's own ambitions.
I would love to be having a front page of the Telegraph with a plane taking off to Rwanda. That's my dream.
That's a dream unlikely to come true soon. Her plans to send asylum seekers to Rwanda subject to legal challenges. But the words she briefed made the front pages today. Each battle, even if lost, fought with an eye on the polls.
6 in 10 in red wall seats support stopping migrants and small boats from illegally entering the UK by using any means necessary.
146 countries are signatories to the UN's Refugee Convention, getting them round the table 7 decades after its conception, unlikely. But it's the message that matters.
Well, in a moment, I will be speaking to Aderonke Apata, who fled Nigeria, saying she feared for her safety as an openly gay woman. But just before we came on air, I spoke to the Conservative MP Brendan Clark-Smith and put it to him that the Home Secretary clearly wants a new definition of refugee.
Well, I think she's right to as well. I think we look at the original definition that came there in the 1950s. It was very well intentioned, and it's obviously looking out for people who are persecuted and making sure that people can fulfill their obligations and look after them, really. But what you're getting to the point now, and I think this is what the Home Secretary was really on about, is where people are under genuine threats, where they're going to be tortured, where their life is genuinely in danger. That's what we should be focusing on. She mentioned that in some cases it may be unpleasant or people may feel discriminated against, and that's terrible, of course, but that's not necessarily a reason to claim asylum, and I think that's really what she was trying to focus on.
I mean, she was quite explicit, perhaps, about who she thought shouldn't be deemed to be a refugee. Simply being gay or a woman, she said explicitly. Last year, 1,300 people claimed asylum based on their sexual orientation. The top countries of origin were Pakistan, Bangladesh and Nigeria, where simply being gay, as she puts it, is illegal, punishable by life imprisonment in some parts of Nigeria by death.
And that's completely wrong. And of course, in Britain, our values, it doesn't matter what race you are, what religion you are, what sexuality you are. And those are values that we stand by. And those are things that we're very keen to push around the world as values as well.
But surely that's just the point.
Realise
simply being gay, as she put it, in some countries is extremely dangerous. And surely simply being gay in certain countries would still guarantee you or entitle you to refugee status or not?
Well, perhaps in some cases it would depend on the individual circumstances, but you have to remember as well, those people will have travelled through a number of safe countries as well. You look at France, you look at Germany, you look at Italy, you look at Greece, you look at Spain. Now, these are all countries where they actually respect the LGBT community and where you can actually be safe. So I think there is a little bit of kind of asylum shopping that goes on there as well, and that's something that we can't ignore.
It's interesting that you raise the term asylum shopping. Do you have no qualms at all about how the Home Secretary characterised migrants today? She said 3/4 of whom, incidentally, get leave to remain from her own government. She talked about them being a threat to national security, a threat to public safety. She warned of heightened levels of criminality. Multiculturalism has failed, she said. I mean, at best, this is pretty offensive. At worst, it could be deemed to be quite dangerous in terms of that characterisation, couldn't it?
We've got to make sure that the people coming over are who they say they are. And of course, we have a responsibility to protect the public as well. But we've accepted hundreds of thousands of asylum seekers. We've had people coming from Ukraine, people coming from Hong Kong, from Syria, from Afghanistan, and we're a very welcoming country. And of course, we want that to continue. And there are people from other countries claiming that as well. But we also want to make sure that...
So you have no qualms about the language? You have no qualms about the language or the characterisation?
I think people choose their language carefully. I mean, there's, again, the multicultural term. And again, as I said earlier, I think in this country that we value you, whatever your race or religion is, and that's a very British value. And those are things that I would hope that anybody coming to Britain would respect as well. And we respect our neighbours, we respect our friends. And in some places, that's not the case. And of course, that's why many wish to leave those countries. But there are safe countries they are on the way here. The
Home Secretary wants, she says, a big discussion about the Refugee Convention and whether it is fit for a modern world, as she put it. If she doesn't get that, she won't say whether we should withdraw from it or not. Do you think we should?
Well, I think we'll have to wait and see. You have the same discussion with the ECHR as well. But I'd just very quickly say the Geneva Convention, it was intended to protect individual people from persecution, but a significant number of people who claim asylum do so for broadly economic reasons. That was Labour in 2009 that said that. Jack Straw, Phil Wallace, they've spoke about rewriting the Geneva Convention. So this isn't a new thing, but it is something that I think we certainly need to look at. But it hasn't been done. So are you saying that we should look at withdrawing? Not necessarily withdrawing, but I think we can certainly put some pressure on with our international partners. As I said, they're having problems as well. And we all want to grant asylum. We all want to fulfill our humanitarian obligations. But I think we need it for a modern age as well. So maybe I think it's updating rather than withdrawing. Brendan Clark-Smith, thank you very much for talking to us. Thank you. Well, with me now is Aderonke Apata, who herself was an asylum seeker and is now a barrister who works on asylum cases. The Home Secretary talked today about simply being gay. What did simply being gay mean for you in your home country?
It is not simply being gay. It is facing persecution. Because this kind of a comment from the Home Secretary is not just dangerous. It is something that goes beyond people seeking asylum. She is effectively trying to diminish the persecution that everyone that identifies all over the world as an LGBTIQ person faces. That is all she's trying to do.
Well, what she would say she's trying to do is make a much clearer distinction between, as she put it, what is discrimination and actual persecution.
Well, let us look at it from this angle. In my country, Nigeria, where I come from, we inherited the Penal Code, sections 215 and 214 from the British colony. It does mean that one can go to prison for 14 years for what is called the carnal knowledge of the other of nature.
So to be gay?
Yes, to be a gay person. How could that be discriminatory? That is effectively persecuting someone who is an LGBTIQ person. So which means one cannot afford to say that the state should protect them against that law because it's there. And there's no country that would have such law and protect people against the law. So it is persecution, it is not discrimination.
Give us a sense of what that felt like when you realised you were gay in a country where it is illegal. Give us a sense of what that felt like and why you sought asylum here for that reason.
I felt I was living in a very toxic environment that actually persecuted me for being a lesbian. And there was no way that I could live in that kind of environment as an authentic person that I am now. If I had gone to the police to report someone who had persecuted me, in fact, the government actually persecutes me. So how will I go to the government and say, you are persecuting me and I want you to protect me against the persecution? It was just not possible.
There has to be, Suella Braverman argued today, there has to be a very distinct difference between what is persecution and what is discrimination. And her argument seemed to be that you can be discriminated against, that life can be unpleasant or uncomfortable, but that is not or should not be deemed to be persecution. How would you make the distinction?
The distinction for me here is when someone is being faced with the prospect of going to jail, been imprisoned for 14 years. I don't think that is life being unpleasant. That is one being persecuted against for being who they are.
I mean, a lot of her argument today is about how the Refugee Convention set up in 1951, the world is very different now. There's potential for many, many millions more people, she was claiming, to seek asylum. Do you have any acceptance of that as an argument?
That is not an argument that is acceptable to me. And I'm sure it will not be acceptable to many people because she only wants to rewrite the Refugee Convention, which, to me, it's not an acceptable thing. How would you be saying that being a member of a particular social group should not be part of the Refugee Convention?
Just really, really briefly, I know you're a lawyer now who helps people with asylum cases on this basis. What do you think they will be feeling, the people you try to help, what will they be feeling tonight?
There is so much anxiety amongst the people that we support in African Rainbow Family. And they've all expressed their fears. People have always been self-harming prior to this kind of rhetoric being said by the Home Secretary. Now people have been saying to me, what's going to happen to me? What's going to happen to my case? Am I going to be deported or something? And this means that there's going to be an increase in mental health problems amongst the people that we support in African Rainbow Family. Then we have to be looking for counseling for them. So it's increasing the work for us to do.
Even just the fact that she's raised it as part of the debate?
Yes. That's the comment that we've all seen today. They've called on us several times and say, what's the situation? Where do we go? What's happening? What does this mean for us? That anxiety alone, it's hard for us to even manage amongst people that we support.
Aderonke Apata, thank you so much for coming in to talk to us.